Okay.
I got to get rid of the little pop-up thing. Okay.
Okay, so if you would just tell us your name, how long you've been here, what you do here in town.
My name is Meg Bruck-Krawitz, and I moved to Birmingham in August of 2002. So that's almost 20 years. It's 19 years. Hard to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I work at UAB. I'm a research program manager at the School of Nursing.
Okay. And we've already interviewed your mother, Ellen.
Yes.
And I believe you were living at home at the time, but you had a different experience that day.
Right. So yeah, so we lived in, we're in Manhattan, but I worked in Midtown, and I remember, it's so funny because I still remember this day so clearly. It's hard to believe it's 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I had met a friend to go vote because it was election day for, our local and state elections. And we were walking to work. We both worked in Midtown, a few blocks from each other. And I remember as we were walking and chatting, I heard an airplane, which is not unusual in the city, except you don't usually get jets flying over the city. You get a lot more smaller aircraft. But I heard a jet, and I remember I looked up, and in between the buildings was a very low flying jet. And I thought at the time, that's unusual, but didn't really think anything of it. We were continuing our walk. I think we were like at Lexington Avenue in the 20s, like 29th Street maybe. And all of a sudden there were about 10 police cars just whizzing down the avenue, which again, to have a police car or two or three or, go rushing through the streets of New York was not that unusual. But I do remember it was unusual because there were so many. We just stood at the corner and watched them all go by. And then about 5 minutes later, there were 10 more police cars.
Wait, were you still walking?
Yes, we were still walking.
Yeah.
So,
but you saw one of the planes that hit. Was that the first plane that you saw?
Based on the flight path that it took, it was the first plane. So I think that was the American Airlines plane.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so when I got to work, like something felt off, because again, there were so many emergency vehicles that had been, by that point, because I worked on 42nd Street, and it was just, there were like, it felt like every single emergency vehicle in the city had been headed downtown. And so I got into the building, and you could just tell there was like an energy. I got into my floor, and right away a plane hit the World Trade Center. Okay, this is very strange, but it didn't really sink in as a major event, because anybody who grew up in New York knows that, I think it was in the 30s, there was an airplane that hit the Empire State Building.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thought, it was like, that's some kind of weird fluke accident, except it was a crystal clear day, blue sky, a cloud in the sky. So, but it was still like, okay. And it wasn't until the news that went around that a second plane had hit the other tower. It's like, oh, that's not an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, well, I want to say it wasn't even at that point, like nobody was doing any work.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like, I got in and everybody was just standing. We're at our desks, but really just kind of sitting there in shock. And I remember I was up chatting with a friend, and they had all the executives of the company I was working for had gone into a conference, and I was standing in the door of one of the offices, and he had left the radio on, and I was just listening because I couldn't sit. I couldn't do it. And we were just like, we just have to stay here because we just like, what do we do? We don't know what's going on. And when that, and I heard on the radio as they were reporting live on the radio when the first tower collapsed, and that was even more than the planes hitting the twin towers was when that first building collapsed. That was just it's like then you knew it was like it was done, it was over, because if there were any people left inside that could be rescued, it was like you knew that was it. And then of course if the first one fell and the second one wasn't going to be that far behind. Yeah.
And how far away were you from the World Trade Center where you were working?
So 42nd Street is maybe 5 miles.
Okay.
It's like 20 blocks per mile. And but then of course below where they stop being numbered is kind of hard. So I want to say it's about 5 miles from.
And did you, so after you heard that the tower had collapsed, were people you were working with, like, had they left? Were they like, I'm out of here? Or
no, we again, like everybody we sat there. I don't think we left the office for another hour or two at least.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because it, at that point it was like, okay, so this is, and then I think that, already the other plane had hit the Pentagon, and then I don't remember if they had like if it was on the news that the fourth plane went down in Pennsylvania yet, or if they kind of tried to hold that back for a bit. But it was like, what's next? We didn't know. It was like, was it like, what should we do? Where can we go? And it really is like, you knew, it's like at that point it was like nothing was happening. They eventually did say, okay, everybody go home. I remember walking home because again, nothing was running. Like the bus drivers were going home, the cab drivers were going home. Subways weren't running because major part of the subway system was out of service. And I was walking with a different coworker, and we were walking downtown, and I remember looking down the avenue and saying, oh, look at all those clouds down there. That's so funny that there's just like one cloudy spot, these big white puffy clouds. And he stopped and he grabbed me. He's like, Meg, those aren't clouds, that's smoke. I was like, oh. It was just, again, I mean, it was.
Because had you seen pictures of what it had? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because we didn't have, I mean, this was before cell phones. I mean, I had a cell phone, but it was certainly before smartphones. It was before, everything was on video. So there's no TVs in the office, I heard it on the radio, and that was it. It wasn't until I got home that I saw and some of the pictures. And even then, I think that they were very careful not to show the footage over and over again. They were showing more live pictures was going on, but I may not have even seen the images of the planes hitting the building for a few days.
And did you do you remember how long it took you to get home? Was it just people everywhere?
Yeah, it was just people everywhere. I mean, it was it was like busy sidewalks. And there must have been traffic on the street. I really don't remember. But
yeah,
it's about 2 miles from where I live, so it was not a long walk really. So, but there were just lots of people in the street, and then of course, I remember the line in front of the hospital. So we lived right at the base. There are like 3 hospitals in a row, right in the house. And people were just lined up to give blood, because at that point there was still the hope, well, they might find some survivors and they'll need blood. I remember going across the street to the pizzeria and trying to order pizza, and they were just like, people were out the door, the phone didn't stop ringing, and it was just, and people were like sending pizzas to the hospital, and it just seemed very surreal. And then
Mhm.
at that point, it's just like you just went home and watched TV, watched the news for the rest of the day.
Do you remember, so when you was work like don't come back, like how long were you out, and like how did that?
We were out until Thursday or Friday. So the city was completely shut down for 3 days. So that was Tuesday. So I know at least probably until Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody went anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything was closed. It was just closed. The city was closed. And like the only air traffic, and you don't realize how much airplane traffic you hear in the city until you don't hear it anymore. Because even though we weren't really that close to JFK or LaGuardia, I guess Peterborough was fairly close, but there was nothing except for the F-16s. And that was the only traffic we heard. And that sounds so different than a commercial jet. And so it was just really eerie to have that silence in the city, that there was nobody out in cars, that people really weren't walking around. Everybody was just at home. It was very, very surreal. And then as things started to slowly open up, they had the lower part of Manhattan really kind of shut off from everything. If you lived there, I think there were streets that you could get to, but we lived on 23rd Street. And I remember like life ended at 23rd Street. Like if the subways were running, they stopped at 23rd Street. All the buses stopped at 23rd Street, and they had cops out at every intersection just diverting traffic left to right, to say, no, you can't go further south, you got to turn around and go back. And it was different. Probably the still the most striking thing that I remember about the days after 9/11 was the smell. And there was just that kind of metallic burnt. It wasn't like nice campfire smell. It was like burnt metal smell that was in the air. And that, I mean, it must have been like that for a couple of months. And then, slowly week by week, like at some point, 23rd Street wasn't the end of Manhattan anymore, and you could get to 14th Street.
Yeah.
And then at some point, 14th Street wasn't then, you could get to Houston Street, and so on and so forth. But it was, just those first few days, it just been quiet, and how eerie it was. And then I think I was back at work on the following Monday.
And did you had you already decided you were gonna come to Birmingham for graduate school, or like did 9/11 have something to do with your I'm out of here?
It did. I had already decided I was going to apply to graduate school, and I had already picked a number of schools that I was going to apply to, and a lot of them were out of New York City, but I had also applied to schools in New York City. And I think up until that point, I really thought, oh, I'd go to graduate school in the city and maybe continue working and do that. And then, but that there were a couple of events even after 9/11. I remember there was a fire drill in our building that fall. So I don't remember if it was October or November, but it was soon after 9/11. And our whole building was out on the street, just kind of waiting, because we're like, okay, it wasn't a planned fire drill. We didn't know what was really going on. And then one person started running up the street. And that just started a cascade of the whole panic reaction. People just started running, and it was like I can't do this anymore, because just I didn't, at that point, I really didn't think that we were a target anymore, but it's just it felt unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was 9/11 was a big influence in why I left New York. I I never intended to stay in Birmingham either. I came here.
It's a great place.
It is, and I knew people here, so I felt comfortable because I knew, I had already known people here, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll do my 2 years in grad school and then, find a job somewhere else in the country, and it'd be a great adventure. But life had other plans for me. I met my husband, and we got married, and had a child right away, and then had some more, and then and I'm still here 10 years later.
Yay! Well, what about have you been back to New York for like extended time since then?
Yes. Well, extended time. I've been back for a few weekends. And I guess certainly until my parents moved to Birmingham, I went up more, and I got married in New York. So there, that, and I remember, and then again, it was sometime that probably that fall or winter. Some of the people like that I had worked with in Birmingham came up to New York, and I took them down to Ground Zero. You could still see it was still smoldering, and they still, were. I think I have pictures still that they were. I mean, they were like hoses still running. And this was like months afterwards that it was still, and you could see the frame of one of the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
It was really eerie. And of course, there were all the memorials that were put up, like everywhere, anywhere there was any kind of free space. I remember there were a lot of scaffoldings, and they would put like board on the scaffoldings on the sidewalk, and they were just plastered with missing pictures and flowers and candles, and just everywhere you went, anywhere, every park, there was like just pop-up memorials for people. And that was also that went on for several months. But life slowly returned back to normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, in some ways it hasn't. I mean, I think of the things that like air travel will never be the same. 9/11, that's something that was permanently altered by that. I don't really think anything else. Maybe, I don't know.
But for you, once you got down here, you were in school, you were married, life was rolling along. And
yeah, pretty much. I was also lucky that I didn't know anybody who died in 9/11. I mean, I had a couple of friends from high school who had friends and family in the police department, but they were not, I don't know, they just weren't down there. And so in that sense, I felt it, not that it didn't touch my life in such a personal way as I think for the people who actually lost people that.
Right. Yeah. What would you want people to remember about September 11th?
I really would like people to remember how they felt the days after, those few days after September 11th, and how we were the United States of America. We were one people, and I know New York is not always viewed very well, especially here. It's a liberal hotbed of God knows what. but on that day, it was like they didn't attack New York. They attacked our country, and we responded in those few days. I think there was a tremendous feeling of solidarity and national pride, and you know that's been lost. And I wish that people would remember that, you know, whatever our differences are, we're all still Americans living here. You know, even people who weren't born here, is, you know, we're here because we want to be here. And that we have more in common than we have not in common. So
You are not alone in that sentiment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think just about everyone has said that. And you know, Americans did demonstrate their courage and resolve in the days afterwards. And yeah, we can be better to each other than we are, for sure. Anything else you want to add? Well, if you think of anything, you know where I am.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's still, it's so weird to me that it's 20 years, because again, so many of these memories are like, you know,
They're seared in.
Yeah, they are. And it's so funny, you know, the friend that I was walking to work with is like, you know, we stay in touch, but you never stay in touch as much as you like, especially we're in different places now. But every September 11th, we message each other, and it's just like, yeah, hi, yeah, of course, remember, yeah, you know, it's bittersweet, and you know, but and in a way, I'm glad that that we've moved forward and kind of gotten past it, and it is just another historical, maybe horrific historical event, because you know those days after, it just seemed like, you know, oh my God, life will never be the same after this. And you know, but it is, because you know, people live, people die, people get married, people have children, people get divorced, people go to school, people quit school, you know, they get jobs, they get new jobs. You know, stuff
Life goes on.
Life goes on, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do really appreciate you talking to me tonight. And oh, hang on.